Do you identify as neurotypical or neurodivergent? I identify as neurodivergent because I live with the neurodevelopmental disorder known as ADHD. According to the DSM-5, ADHD, also known as attention deficit hyper disorder, is a disorder with its onset in early childhood and is characterized by symptoms of hyperactivity, inattention, and impulsivity that interfere with daily and occupational functioning. I was diagnosed as an adult, but I have been living with it ever since I was a child. It just so happens that girls are less likely to be diagnosed, and I live with the disorder untreated for a very long time. According to Stephen Henshaw, professor of psychology at University of Berkeley, California, says that ADHD is an equal opportunity condition. However, there are 50% fewer girls than boys being referred for ADHD evaluations and treatments. Today I'll be discussing the history of ADHD treatments that they have used to maintain it, as well as my personal experience of living with the disorder as a woman. According to the U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health, the first example of a disorder that appeared to be similar to ADHD was given by a Scottish physician by the name of Sir Alexander Crichton in 1798. His studies found that the symptoms of ADHD involved the subjects being inattentive, the difficulty sustaining attention in tasks or play activities, being easily distracted by extraneous stimuli, as well as being present before the age of 7, stating it can be born with a person and it be evident at a very early period of life. Sir Alexander Crichton wrote an inquiry into the nature of mental derangement, comprehending a concise system of physiology and pathology of the human mind, and a history of the passions and their effects. Crichton was ahead of his time by almost 2 centuries in his observations of what is now known under the DSM-5 as the inattention subtype of ADHD. According to the DSM-5, there are 3 types of ADHD: the inattentive type, the hyper type, impulsive type, or a combination of the two. The inattentive type diagnosis criteria include the displaying of poor listening skills, loses and or misplaces items needed to complete activities, sidetracked by external stimuli, forgets daily activities, diminished attention span, and lacks the ability to complete schoolwork or follow instructions, and so on and so forth. Hyperactive type diagnosis criteria include the squirming or fidgets with feet, hands, marked restlessness that is difficult to control, appears to be driven by a motor or is often on the go, lacks the ability to play and engage in leisure activities in a quiet manner, and incapable of staying seated in class and overly talkative. Impulsive symptoms include difficulty waiting turn, interrupts or intrudes into conversations and activities of others, impulsively blurts out answers before questions are completed. Although the DSM was way before his time, Sir Crichton was essentially on point when it came to the understanding of the inattentive subtype of ADHD. And before you think you might suffer from untreated ADHD, there are some additional requirements needed for the diagnosis of ADHD, such as the symptoms need to be present before the age of 12 years, and if the symptoms are not better accounted for by different psychiatric disorder, such as a mood or anxiety disorder, and do not occur exclusively during a psychotic disorder, such as schizophrenia. Symptoms are not exclusively a manifestation of oppositional behavior. In summary, there has been a known attention disorder since the early 1800s studied by Sir Alexander Crichton, who loosely defined the subtype of inattentive types that follow under the DSM-5. Though this discovery of this disorder has preceded its time, treatments for this condition are still considered relatively new. The first treatment of hyperactivity was reported by Charles Bradley, a medical director of Emma Pendleton Bradley Home, called Bradley Hospital, in East Providence, Rhode Island, in the year 1937. This discovery only occurred by chance during Bradley's neurological examinations. He was performing a pneumoencephalogram on children to examine the structural brain abnormalities that were caused by several headaches as a result from significant loss of spinal fluid. Bradley tried to put a stop to the headaches using a stimulant called benzodrine on the choroid plexus. However, it had negligible effects on the headaches and caused a great improvement in behavior and school performance on some of the children. Because of the behavioral improvements he saw, he then started a systematic trial in 30 of the children from the hospital and observed immensely remarkable alterations in their behaviors. The study found that there were improvements in the focus of children as well as decrease in motor activity, which is associated with hyperactivity. Although Bradley and his colleagues published their discovery in prominent journals, their reports had almost no influence on research and practice for at least 25 years. Right now, stimulant medication is the most frequently used among children with ADHD. Methylphenidate, which is marketed as Ritalin, is considered the first drug of choice to administer to kids with ADHD. There's also a drug called dextroamphetamine, which is Adderall, and that is what I personally use to treat my ADHD. In short, treatments have been discovered for hundreds of years, and even today we're still using stimulants as the key medication used to help with the symptoms. There have been many who struggled with the condition with and without the use of stimulant and non-stimulant medication. Here's how I've dealt with it myself. Being diagnosed as ADHD wasn't the end of my world, but a fresh start into a new one. I suffered through hyperactivity and inattentiveness symptoms for a very long time before my psychiatrist tested me for ADHD. Hyperactivity in my childhood years was a hell of a ride. Have you ever wondered why you got into so much trouble in school for talking too much or not being able to pay attention? It was a constant battle for me to keep up with my schoolwork, and everything was always so messy. I experienced severe depression, stress, and anxiety, low self-esteem. Every day was a constant struggle of being able to get up and function and behave how it was expected for me to. I would see other kids in school who were just so good at being a student, and I wanted it to be that easy for me. It just wasn't, and I didn't know what to do. I started going to therapy and talking to a psychiatrist when I turned 27, and I have been on medication ever since. Talking about it has really helped. Many people on social platforms such as TikTok also share their experiences with us that are very relatable, and it can make you feel like you aren't alone dealing with these things. My therapist has me taking 40 milligrams of Adderall XR, which is extended release capsule meant to help the medication last longer than a regular tablet would. Many people shy away from medication for ADHD. However, for me, I have found that it's the best way for me to stay functioning well in school, at work, and in my home life. Overcoming the symptoms has been a mountain of a climb, and like many others, I haven't reached the top of it yet. I am hopeful that the more knowledge I gain and understanding I have of my disorder, the more power I have to conquer it. Although attention deficit hyperdisorder has been around for a very long time, the treatments and medications are being changed and enhanced for people like me all over the world who just want to live a normal lifestyle like the neurotypicals we meet every day. Remember that ADHD isn't a bad thing, and you shouldn't feel different from those without ADHD, says Adam Levine of the band Maroon 5.